Well, it is Wednesday, which means it is time for the Progress Report at 7 o'clock on Channel 23 in Manchester. Welcome, everybody. It is the Progress Report with Bob Backus, but without Bob Backus this week. The brilliant and handsome Bob Backus is on assignment, studying the movement of railroad trains out west. He's taken a grand tour of the West in his favorite mode of transportation, and he will be back next week, I believe. But he's attending some family functions, and I hope he's having a great time out there. In the meantime, despite his absence, we will try to soldier on. We have what I think is a very timely and hopefully interesting TV show that we've put together for you here today. It is the filing period for the municipal elections. We are getting into the political season here in Manchester, and as part of that, there is a new and different position that's going to be on the ballot this year, having to do with a new charter commission, but not the kind of charter commission that we've seen in the past. This is a whole new thing on a very specific issue. And as our guest this week, we have a frequent guest, an authority on this particular issue, former alderman, school committee member, and state representative Pat Long, who is the author of the bill that actually began the process of putting together this charter commission. So we're going to spend the day talking about this charter commission, where it comes from, what it's trying to do, and hopefully encourage folks who might be interested. There's still time to sign up if you want to run for that position. And we really encourage callers on this particular topic. If you are at all interested in Manchester schools, Manchester politics, this is a topic that we'd love to have your feedback. The number here is 640-3091. But enough of my chatter. Let's get to the meat of the issue. Pat, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening, everybody.
Glad to have you.
Pleasure to be here.
We typically have people give their bio to start the show off with, because our theory is nothing gets done if people don't do it, and so we want to get to know the people. But Pat, you've been on the show a lot. I think folks know who you are. You're a former alderman from Ward 3. Right now you're serving on the Board of School Committee as an at-large school committeeman. Yep. You're also a state rep for Ward 3, a long-time state rep and chairman of the Manchester delegation up at the State House.
Yep. And executive council on the Hillsborough County.
Correct.
Vice chair.
Yeah. No kidding. I know they rotate that between the cities and the towns. I was on the executive council for a while. That's a Friday morning gig, right?
Correct. You got it. Yep.
So welcome, Pat. You are a very good guest for us to have on the show to talk about this school charter commission that we will be voting on in the upcoming elections.
Sure.
So why don't we start? I'll just let you explain what's the problem, or what did you perceive as the issue that might need some attention, and then we'll move from there after we talk about that into your potential solution.
Well, I see a couple of concerns that I have with the current system. One is that the fact that that the state of New Hampshire established our charter, so they're tied into the city of Manchester school district, and we need to go to ask for permission to get, for example, the school district becoming a division of the city.
A city department, which was another solution to the problem, I guess, being that basically every couple of years, the school department comes to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, the governing body of the city, hat in hand.
Yep. That's every year.
Every year.
Every year.
And they give them a list. That's right. It's the state that does the biennial budgets. I'm getting a little bit confused on that. But so they come hat in hand. They say, we're going to need so much money, and this is where we think we'd like to allocate it. Can you give that money to us so we can run the schools?
Yeah.
And then the aldermen provide the money. Sometimes they give what is requested, sometimes a little less.
Yeah.
I don't know if they've ever given a little more, but maybe they have. So the problem really is kind of accountability. You always have this tension between the school board and the aldermen, one with the purse strings, the other with the grocery list.
Correct.
And when things don't go right, and we've had some issues with our schools. I don't want to denigrate them, because we've got great schools and great people working in them and great kids studying in them.
Sure.
But let's just agree that there's room for improvement in everything, and there's certainly room for improvement in the school district.
Right. Yeah.
So when folks aren't feeling like they're getting what they need out of the school district can simply point to the alderman and say, well, they didn't give us what we needed.
That's correct. Yeah,
It's a scapegoat.
Yeah,
and they're not
it's
really
no
accountable.
accountability. There isn't. Look at campaigns. As an alderman campaigning, my only reference to education was, I'm all for education. What does that mean? That means that there's going to be a time when I'm going to have to appropriate money, and maybe I'll appropriate what they need or a little more than what they need. And as an alderman, I thought, yeah, I know the school district. I could figure out what they need. They're going to present to us, and I could figure that out. But sitting now as an at-large school member, there's a lot of details when you peel that onion, where they need advancement for better student achievement. And too much for any alderman to know. I mean, it's another full-time job, just getting into the details
Well,
of the
hence
school
the
committee.
existence of the Board of School Committee. That's their job,
That's
is to
correct.
figure out
I mean,
what's the best policy
you know,
to educate the kids of Manchester.
Yeah, campaigning this, school committee candidates campaign on educational advancement. Aldermen campaign on, city advancement, whether it be, safety,
Infrastructure,
what
health,
have you.
mental,
Yeah,
all of the issues that we have in the city.
they're two separate.
Education is just
so-
one component of what the alderman has to worry about.
That's right. And the educational aspect of our budget is larger than the city budget. So it's even more of a concern to me that this is the system that we have set up, where the aldermen appropriate the total number and the school district, details that in line items. So it's, as an alderman, let's say, okay, they need $1.7 million. Okay, we'll appropriate 1.7, and guess what? We're going to give them an extra 250,000. Hey, I'm going to pat myself on the back. Great job. And in reality, that's not the case. It's not what's proven. It's the school district, the school board, the school committee that knows what is needed. For example, we have initiatives that we're able to do. Let's take the iReady. When we implemented the iReady,
Well, what is that?
the iReady is a program that looks at advancement in each student. So you're able on a program to see advancement in each student, and it requires a tablet. Dr. Vargas told us when they first implemented that we're 5,000 tablets short, and we don't have the bandwidth. So again, it's a financial issue that the school committee has to look within their budget, which they've already appropriated in line items, to see, okay, how can we get more tablets? How can we get bandwidth here?
So the best of intentions, but the implementation didn't go as planned.
That's exactly. And like you had mentioned earlier, the fact as a school board member, somebody calls me who doesn't want to spend any more money, believes the school has efficiencies they could look for. I could easily tell them, yeah, I agree. Yeah, the aldermen, they gave us too much money. On the other hand, somebody who's looking to appropriate more money to the schools for advancement, I could always tell them, I understand, yes, I wanted 2 Spanish teachers in Central, however, the alderman didn't give us enough money.
So it's a little bit of a pass.
That's right.
You're allowed to, if you want to take it, to take a pass.
That's right.
Not everybody would do that. I don't know that you're the kind of guy that would do that, but you could if you.
No, you could. Yeah, in
theory,
could if you can. That's right. Exactly. So, like I said, campaigning for both alderman and school board. They're separate. They ought to be separate. The school board ought to be autonomous to itself. Come election time, if you don't like what your school committee member's doing, you vote for somebody else. There's no excuse of we didn't get enough money or we got, too much money. They know what the school district needs. Administration, they work closer with administration as an alderman. The only time I worked with administration was during a budget. The school administration was during a budget. All year round, the Board of School Committee members are working with administration. So both of them jointly, that's the way it's supposed to work. That's the way this governing body is supposed to work. However, we have them working together, but yet we look for the finances through another government, government body, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen.
And also, the issue, like there may be a voter who doesn't think enough money was given to the schools, but thinks too much was given to the city. And how does he express that when the only vote that matters is the vote for alderman?
No,
Because voting for
exactly.
school board doesn't impact the money.
That's correct. That's correct.
Well, I want to go back, talk a little bit of history, because this tension between the two boards, it's been going on since you and I were babies. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? This
no,
is,
exactly.
or actually since the school district was established,
Sure.
because at one time when I was in school, it was a department of the city and,
Yeah.
run right out of City Hall. And I want to talk a little bit about that. In the past, it has been suggested, and to this day, I believe School Committeeman Rich Gerard advocates making the school department a department of the city.
Yeah.
At least that's what I've seen on his TV show in his media. But and that was proposed, and in fact, there was a movement several elections ago to put that question as a referendum on the ballot. And I think the question was something like, should the school district become a department of the city? And I actually went down to City Hall during the 3-minute speeches that you're allowed to give, and I spent 3 minutes arguing that was not a good question to put on the ballot, because what's the alternative? It's so open-ended.
Right.
We know what we're getting rid of, but we have no idea what we're walking into.
Right.
And
Right.
it did end up in the as a referendum on the ballot, I believe, and I believe it was voted down, and perhaps because people didn't know what the
Right.
alternative was going
Right.
to be. So I want to talk a little bit about the difference between that
Yep.
and the proposal that you've proposed. And
Sure.
why don't we take the next few minutes before the break to talk about your proposal,
Yep.
which comes down through a statute in Concord.
Correct.
But you're not just saying, one sentence. This is a process. So why don't you
Yeah,
describe
correct.
what you're proposing?
Yeah, the bill that passed, it was signed by the governor last week, is to allow Manchester to set up the Board of Mayor and Aldermen have the authority to set up charter commissions, but not when it comes to school districts. When it comes to a school district, it's tied into statutes in the state, so
Yep.
so it's
There's
a little
a
different
whole
process.
series of statutes
So-
dealing with how districts are set up, how they're run. The SB2 districts are different from,
Correct. Correct.
So
My bill allows us to set up a charter commission without the interference of the general court, meaning the state reps and the Senate and the governor. That this charter shall be set up, and they'll come up with policies of how to run a school district. I mean, it was done in 2011 with the Concord district. They were the same as Manchester, and they put in this same bill to break away from the state and set up their own. They call it the Board of Education, their Board of Education. And they set up how many school board representatives. They set up all the governance, who's going to be the chairman, how does that get elected. And the difference between this and a department would be under the city of Manchester, under the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. So the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, primarily the mayor, would have the line item, setting the line item. So you're asking the aldermen to not only be aldermen, but to be school board
to
representatives.
actually write the
'Cause in
budget
essence,
and not to only
correct.
appropriate a lump sum, but to write the budget, where it's going to go, this much for teachers, this much for, and we have to concede, though, that there are some efficiencies by using the same HR department.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's the case, because I don't know if you could use the same HR department. I mean, the HR departments are totally different with respect to, federal and state law with respect to teachers and administrators and superintendents than it is for officers and department heads.
You're pointing something out, because there is a lot of statutory governance of even if it were a department of the city, the government of the district is still under the state law.
That's correct.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
So
there's
they-
still requirements. You can't get away from requirements.
There would still be a Board of School Committee.
Correct, like your reports that are due to Department of Education in New Hampshire, the Department of Revenue Administration of New Hampshire, the federal titles reports. You still have all those that you're required to do. You're not gonna.
Which kind of
You're not gonna get out of that.
illustrates that we didn't know what we were getting into.
No,
when
that's
we're
right.
talking about
right.
just one of the many issues that would have arisen if we did go to the department.
Right.
So let's leave that aside. That's in the past. It may or may not be a good solution, but we're faced right now with the possibility of electing a charter commission.
Correct.
How many members?
There'll be 9.
9 members.
Yep.
Now, do these people that are going to be on this charter commission, should we be looking at all principals and teachers to be on this charter commission? Is this something where educational expertise is going to be called upon, or is
I'm not.
or is it government? What is it?
Educational expertise isn't what this is about. This is not setting policy with respect to our education in the school district. It's governance. It's purely governance. How will this entity, the school district, govern itself? And that's what it's about. It's not implementing any educational programs. It's simply governance to the school district, which is what the Board of School Committee ought to be. They are the governance. Sometimes we delve into details that we shouldn't be, delving into. We're the policy setter. So it's this charter sets up a policy, a governance, not an educational process.
I might be getting ahead of myself by thinking about this as a referendum. It's not a referendum to create a separate taxing entity. It is simply an election of a board to look at the question.
Correct.
So I actually was thinking about
Correct.
it one step beyond where it actually is. So this board is going to happen. It's not
Correct.
it's not dependent on whether the people vote yes or no on a referendum. They're going to be electing members to this board. Now, the
That's
board
correct.
may come up with an idea. You know what? No, we don't want to have separate taxing authority, but that's
right.
what the
You're
board
right.
is going to, the commission
right.
is going to be forced to look into the question.
Yes.
Okay, I
Yes,
understand a heck of a lot better.
It's not an automatic. Who knows what they're going to come up with.
Yeah.
These 9 representatives on this charter commission will review what we currently have. They'll set whatever policy they may want. Personally, I'm a strong believer in letting the school board come up with their budget and have control over that themselves instead of having to go to another entity
Which is
get that.
how Concord ended up
That's
after
correct.
going through the charter process.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was kind of telescoping everything together, but it's going to be a much more drawn out process. The first
Right.
step is to take a look at the issue, get people, elected people from the city with authority to make a recommendation, and then that recommendation is what would go to the voters
In
by way of
2020.
referendum in the next election. So,
That's correct.
so they'd have a year to work.
Yep.
Excuse me. Looks like we do have a caller, and we love our callers, so we're going to take that call. Brian, you're on line 1. What have you got to say for yourself?
Yeah, I wanted to know if this charter commission the school charter commission could vote to do away with the school board.
Oh, that's a good question. I guess. Do you want to hang on or do you want to just take the answer off the air?
Yeah, I'll take the answer off.
Okay, thanks for the question. That is a great question.
So Brian, this charter commission isn't voting for anything. Eventually, the voters of Manchester will be voting for everything. This charter commission will just set up. Can they conceivably get rid of a school board? I guess they can. I don't see how that could happen, but
I would think they may
suppose
have legal
can.
opinions coming in saying that might not be the best
No,
idea.
exactly.
And
So-
it would take a majority vote of the commission
Right.
to put that as part of their final plan. We're going to have a separate school district or a department of the city
Right.
and no school board.
So they're going to come up with a policy plan that's going to be reviewed by the voters, and in November of 2020, the voters will vote to approve or not approve this policy that they've come up with.
So regardless of what they come up with, the voters are going to have the final say.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that was a great question, though. I mean,
No, it was.
taking
No,
it to
you're
the extreme.
absolutely right.
Could they actually do that? And I guess in theory, maybe they could,
they could
but
do-
the voters don't have to accept it.
They have the last say.
Fair enough. We've hit our first break. I think why don't we take a quick pause here? We'll regroup. Plan out our next set of questions. And
Sure.
folks, we'll be right back. We want to encourage you to call 640-3091. This is real local stuff. It hasn't really gotten a lot of press. It's kind of flying in under the radar, and the filing period is going to close on Friday, which is why we wanted to do it on this show here this week. So if you've got any questions or comments or anything like that, this is the place to do it. We'll be right back, and we'll continue with the progress report. Well, welcome back, folks. Thanks for watching the Progress Report this Wednesday, the 17th of July. I can't believe it. We're almost, we're better than halfway through July. It's amazing how time flies when you're having fun, and we've finally gotten some good summer weather. But thank you for watching the Progress Report, folks. Today we are talking about a pretty important issue that's going to be on the ballot this coming November. Well, let me ask, is there going to be a primary, or is it going to be
No, it's going to be November.
on November?
In November, you'll pick nine members out of how many? Right now, there's like 20 of them signed up right
Okay,
now.
I mean, in the last city charter commission, I think there was, 63
Yeah,
people
60
signed up. I
yeah.
was one of those cattle.
and there were 9 chosen from there too.
Yeah.
So
I want to talk a little bit about the process that this is going to follow, because this is happening, and I'm really surprised that it's not getting more press on the Union Leader website and that kind of thing, and because people, the elections, it seems like a long way away, but it's really not that far away, and people are going to get this. Are they going to get an extra ballot? Is it going to be on the back side of the ballot? Do you
I'm
know
not
what the
sure.
mechanics of it are?
I'm not sure what the mechanics are. I mean, if there's a long list, I would think that would be put on another ballot.
Yeah, maybe it will.
So, just to make clear, the bill requires the establishment of a charter commission to recommend a procedure to revise, amend, or replace the school district charter without legislative approval. So this breaks us away from legislative approval. It puts us on our own to decide what's in the best interest of Manchester School District.
And this, probably an arcane point, but there was a time when no city or town could establish its own charter. It all had to be
correct.
voted individually by the state representatives in Concord.
Right.
And any amendments had to come from Concord. But a statute was passed allowing, they call it the home rule
rule,
statute.
yeah.
It's not really home rule in the traditional sense like out west where they actually have home rule. But it does allow states to govern, cities and towns to govern their own charters.
Correct.
And so what your bill does, which has passed and been signed, is now Manchester has the authority to control its own school district charter.
That's
As
correct.
opposed to having the
That's
remnant, because
Yeah.
Manchester, one of the oldest cities.
Because if you wanted to revise your charter, you would have to go get state legislative approval.
Yeah.
So you'd have to put a bill in, to do whatever you want to do and wait for their approval to do it.
So this allows us to decide here in Manchester what we want to do.
That's correct.
And the Charter Commission gets established, and it only lasts so long, right? Once
It lasts for less than a year, because I'm assuming that they'll get elected in November. And they'll have to have their policy in, I'm thinking by September, to get it out to the voters.
because there's an education process that you have to
Correct,
go
an
through before
educational
they elect it.
process, Before they vote on it
down.
in November.
So they will not decide anything. They're going to make a proposal.
They're gonna
That's
make a
that's the
proposal.
idea.
That's correct.
That's their only.
Yep.
And I guess you in the break you mentioned that a lot of people are asking, could they do this?
Correct.
Could they go out of control? I think is really the question
right.
people
I mean,
are
I
asking.
had some questions of people asking me, could they put in a $20,000 stipend for the school committee? They can, but it's not a reality.
Yeah, if they want
you
their
have
charter to pass,
you have to
they're
vote for
not
that.
gonna put that in there, right?
Exactly. You have
Okay.
to vote for that. I know in Concord, when they did that, they did give them the same stipend as their city councilors.
Now let's talk about Concord. I've every now and then I like to put my nose into local issues, and I have advocated for the school department, the school district having its own taxing authority like they do in Concord.
Yep.
On a theoretical basis, it seems to me that when you know exactly who's putting the tax on you, you know exactly who to complain to when you don't feel you're getting your money's worth.
Right.
So that it was theoretical, and now thanks to your work, we're going to get to put this into a laboratory and see how it works. But in the course of your looking into this bill, what did you find out? What was the result in Concord? Did it actually result in more accountability? If there's a way to measure that, did it result in increased taxes beyond recognition? Did it result in decrease, or was it more? What did you get out of your looking at how Concord was doing it?
Well, they were able to. Concord had the same issues. The council would argue with the school board on what finances they were going to get. So they had the same issues as we did. They had the same. What I'm hearing now. They're going to tax us out of. We give them their own authority. They're going to tax us out of our houses. Concord had the same thing. It took a couple years for people to relax and say, okay, they're being responsible, because now every school board member was accountable to themselves. If they didn't give enough and their constituents wanted more, or vice versa, they were voted out. So now it's like an alderman. When you come up with a budget, you're going to be reasonable. You have to be reasonable. You can't, here's what we need, 9%, okay, it's 9%. You have to be reasonable. But as an alderman, you're able to do a plan, a 5-year or 10-year plan. As a school board member,
1 year at the most.
that plan is blown up when, okay, we're
Next
going to
year.
get $2 million a year. Oh, geez, we only got 1.2. So what do we take out? So they don't really have the capability of long-term goals or long-term plans.
So how does it actually work? Is it all on one tax bill, or do you even know? I mean, or would
Yeah,
it be?
no, I believe
how do they do it in
Concord-
Concord? Do they get like the city side bill, and then the state
Yeah,
wide property taxes education? So that would be on the education bill. How?
Yeah, I believe they get a bill like we do, breaking down city and
okay.
schools. However, in Concord's case, they have, it's the schools that's setting their, their value per thousand.
You write 2 checks? Would that?
No, because
single
they
tax bill?
reading their revised charter, they go to the city's general fund to pull what they've. So even the school district taxes go into the general fund of the city.
But it's allocated by
But
the
it's
school board.
allocated,
Okay.
yeah, and they, they go into.
And the city
they
can
go
have no
into that.
complaint because everything they allocate, they've already raised.
That's correct.
So it doesn't
correct.
impact the city budget whatsoever.
Yep, no, that's correct.
How about the issue that we see now of, what do they call them, chargebacks?
Yep.
I assume that situation is going to have to continue, or would the school department, I'm sorry, the school district start doing its own, I mean, it theoretically could budget its own facilities maintenance.
I mean,
and that kind of
reading the revised charter for Concord, I didn't see no reference to buildings. I know there's some state statutes that have that scenario that the schools are autonomous to their building when they're a school building.
Mm-hmm.
When it's no longer a school building, it gets turned back to the, to
You
the
get
to
my
the
question.
city.
My
Yeah,
question
no,
wasn't
exactly.
put
So
properly, but-
that could all change. The schools could be the responsibility of the school board. If they sell it, it's their. If they lose money, it's their loss. If they make money, it's their gain. Those are all something that the Charter Commission come up with. In Concord, they didn't address that, so I'm thinking that it stayed the same because of statutes that may or may not have allowed schools to own
Yeah, I've got to assume that
buildings when
this,
they're not school buildings.
I've got to assume that this charter commission is going to have some kind of a budget for legal counsel and that kind of
Correct.
thing, because
Yeah.
especially with the schools, when you're talking about that, there's a lot of interconnectivity. We talked about it at the
Exactly.
beginning of the show
Yeah.
that you got.
Yeah, that was something I didn't think about, but Matt made sure that I was informed that, Pat, you do realize this is going to cost about $25,000. You should give them a budget for legal fees and,
For space
somebody typing up
space to meet
minutes.
the lights when they
yeah,
meet,
exactly,
that kind of thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for an entity to donate that.
Okay, so let's talk about running for this charter commission. Typically, that kind of a thing turns into kind of a popularity contest, who's got the best name recognition, because it's not
Sure.
the kind of thing where the campaigns are, it's not the same as an aldermanic campaign or a school committee campaign. It's just the funds are limited, and it's just not the kind of thing that generates that kind of interest. So what type of person should be running? Who as you envision this, who did you want the mix to be? Do you want a couple teachers? And I mean, what do you think would be a good mix? For
we
a charter
have
commission?
several volunteers that aren't educators that are involved in pretty much everything. That's what I'm looking for. Somebody who's open-minded, somebody who's creative, somebody who's going to look at, not draw a conclusion prior to having a discussion. We need open minds. We need thinking outside the box. People that have that. And, I think going down list of names, I could identify for myself, and I believe the voters can also, of the people that they believe would have that open mind, would have that energy and creativity to come up with something that better serves the city of Manchester than how it's currently running.
Do you expect to have? Let me ask this: is the filing period for this charter commission is identical? So come next Friday, we're going to know
Friday
who,
at 5 o'clock.
who the lineup is.
It's over.
Okay,
yeah.
and there's no primary. This is going to go straight to November.
Correct. I believe so. That's a good question. I don't believe we voted for.
I'm just wondering
commissioners.
how would they? How many would they narrow it down to? It's not like it's ward related where there's one against one. How would you
No, exactly.
narrow
Yeah.
it artificially?
Yeah,
to
I
18
believe we
or
only had
5?
one vote. I gotta verify that. I believe we only had one vote for the Charter Commission. I don't know if it's in September or if it's in November. Maybe in September they vote for I don't recall the last Charter Commissions. I could check with Matt and verify that.
We'll take a look at that. But folks, if you're interested in getting involved, this may be a way to even if you're just interested in getting involved in politics, but get your name out there.
Sure.
You'll be on the ballot. it's not going to be that taxing as far as campaigning, and we might get a good mix of people. I'd encourage folks to bring new people in, to people that maybe you might have heard of, but not in the political sense, to get their ideas as to what we can do to improve our education.
I mean, what I like is I'm seeing on these boards and commissions in the city, I'm seeing faces that I've never seen before. I mean, that's a good thing. I'm seeing a lot of young people showing up. I'm seeing people that have never been involved that are now getting involved. That's to me, that's excitement.
It really is, and
That's
we did a show a couple weeks ago with
Right.
you on it
Yep.
as a guest to talk about that. That is a way. Manchester is the boards and commissions of this city. Start from the zoning board of adjustment to the planning board, to the conduct committee, to the water commissioners, to the fire commissioners,
Yeah.
to the police commission,
Yeah.
to the heritage commission, which I served on. They are starving for members.
Sure. Sure.
They have work to do, and they need quora to
Right.
get that work done. And it is a great way to get to know the people who are working with the city, because you deal with staff. You get to know how the city operates, and to get more involved and contribute to the city, because it's
Right.
volunteer work
Right.
too. They
Right.
don't pay.
Right.
But certainly these commissions are relied upon to do very important work.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's a good way to get involved. It's maybe a once a month. Unless you're on a planning, or it's a couple times a month. But it's a good way to get involved.
Yeah,
It's a good way to meet other people. It's a good way to see what's going on in the city of Manchester.
And you're also getting involved with people that have similar interests as you. If you're on the Arts Commission, you're going to meet people that are interested in art, and so it is a good way to.
So it is the November 5th municipal general election that the charter committee.
So potential for some really long, intense campaigns, but I don't know.
Yeah,
We'll see.
Yeah, I don't know how you campaign on that, but
I'm open-minded.
People know. People know. I go by when I'm going down a list of like that. I'm looking at people that have been able to deliver, that have been able to be creative. I'm not necessarily looking at, here's Adam Sandler. Yeah, I'm going to vote for him because I think he's popular. It's somebody that could do the charge that they're going to have, and it's going to be a tough charge.
But it's not a one-person operation.
No.
You're going to have to work cooperatively.
Correct.
When you have 9 people in a room, sometimes that can be difficult. But with effort, you can get a lot accomplished.
And it's
I'm
been
thinking of some legislative committees. That
No, exactly.
the work gets done. It still gets done.
And it's it's not a new process. Concord's done it. Keene to some point has done it. I believe Portsmouth to some point has done it, but not as much. I'm going for the Concord.
Well, because they actually came up with the result, which, in theory, that it's a result that you think is a good result.
No,
that might work well
I
for
agree.
Manchester.
I agree.
I don't want to.
It advanced their educational process because they were able to plan. They were able to plan. Finances is a big part of your strategic plan. If you don't have control over that, what is your strategic plan? People fault the school board for not implementing strategic plans. A lot of it has to do with finances, and if you just don't get those finances, or if something changes, for example, special education. I asked a question to an entity. Manchester's been averaging about 345 NAL, I can't think of the drug abused babies.
Oh, yeah,
in the
okay,
city of
yeah.
Manchester. 100% of those babies need special education. So I'm thinking for the last 5 years we've had 300 or more births at the city of Manchester.
They're coming into the school system.
They're coming into the
right-
school system
right now.
pretty soon,
Yep.
and that's special education that the taxpayer has to come up with that money. It's tough to address needs when you don't have control of the finances.
Well, we've come to our second break. Let's regroup a little bit here. Actually, we'll take this call. We love our callers. We will postpone the break. And I was getting tired. I needed a little break there. But we'll postpone the break. We got Jim on the line. If I can operate this phone properly. Well, looks like we might have lost him. So we will go to our break. We will regroup, and when we come back, we will kind of do some predictions. I think let's see if we can make some suggestions or guesses on how this is going to work out. So, folks, thank you for watching. We hope you stick with us and come back on the other side of the break. We will be right back. All righty, folks. Thanks for sticking with us. This is the Progress Report. I'm Mike Farley, sitting in for Bob Backus, who's enjoying himself out in the great western part of our country, riding the rails and enjoying some family events. We are here talking about the Charter Commission that will be elected this fall in Manchester to address the situation with the Manchester School District, kind of opening up the possibilities. Our guest here today is former alderman, school committeeman, and state representative Pat Long, who wrote the bill that passed and was signed by the governor recently, which will allow us to do that. And the filing period for that charter commission, along with all of the other public offices here in Manchester, is open as we speak and will be open until Friday at 5 o'clock. Jim, we've got a caller on the line. Jim, we're going to go back and see if we can get you there. Jim, hi, how are you? You're on the Progress Report. What have you got to say?
Hey, Mike. Hi, Mike. Hi, Pat. Jim.
Oh, it's that Jim. Hi, Jim. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great, thanks. I'm great. Thank you guys for doing this great job. Hey, I missed the early part of the show, and I was interested in, and it's a very interesting topic, and I'm looking forward to this Charter Commission. I'm wondering what will happen with regard to the mayor's role, not this mayor, any mayor's role. So, who will? I presume the mayor would then not be part of the new board of school committee, and so is that correct? And then the board would choose a chairman from amongst itself. Is that how it works?
Yeah, I mean, if you're asking me, Jim, I would say yes, but it's up to this commission again to decide that. Yeah, I would think this. I know in Nashua there's a board of education, they call it, which the mayor is not involved. I mean, he is involved because he's interested in it, but he doesn't have a vote. He doesn't have a vote in it.
I'm a big supporter of that. I think the mayor's job is a big enough job already. And in Manchester, the disconnect with the board of mayor and aldermen. I know that historically the aldermen have expressed frustration with the school board, and they're constantly referred to it as, regardless of the school board's back over time, it's what those people are doing over there and what are they doing. And the level of understanding of the average alderman of what happens in the school district is very, very low.
Right.
So
but as an alderman, I thought not a problem. I put my school district hat on, for 2 months out of the year during a budget, and I thought I knew everything.
Right.
I thought I had, I had my thumbs on the pulse, and you know what? Being on that school board, I was so far wrong with that. There was just so much
Pat, let
I
me
did
say,
not
like,
know.
with great respect for everybody, and not to be silly, but like, I'd love to see what happens when this comes to an end, and if it's successful. And I can picture the handover of the schools to from the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to the new school board, and I mean, it would be handed over with great apologies, right? You'll be saying, "I'm sorry for the mess we've made of it." Not just this board, but the last number of boards, right? We're handing you back the least well-funded school system in the state. We're handing you back the 150-year-old buildings that are not up to maintenance and code. We're handing you back the largest class sizes in the state. Where
but
we've
current-
underfunded things left, right, and centre. Our 2,000 employees have.
But currently,
Jim, you're filibustering a little bit. I think we get your point, though.
Yeah, but currently,
No offense, brother.
Currently, the alderman can't hand over things to the school district. That's what this
Right.
commission will establish. So, the aldermen were forced. Their charge was to come up with a total funding package. So they couldn't turn things over to the board. They were responsible for certain things that they had that they're charged currently in our charter.
So, Jim, I want to keep you in the conversation because you're well versed in this stuff. So I'm going to keep the line open, but I just want to comment. So actually, Pat, this commission is an opportunity to address some of the very problems that Jim's talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Jim, your point is well taken. If it turns out that this charter commission decides to break away the school district from the city and set up a separate entity, and if the people approve that, you're right. They may end up saying, "Oh my gosh, what have we stuck ourselves with?" But they will be equipped, in theory anyway, to address the problems immediately with long-range planning as opposed to year by
Right.
year by year tactical maneuvers. Will have some strategy involved.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and
agree 100%,
accountability
right.
just.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
And then they'll be responsible to the voters in the end, right? As Pat said earlier.
That's right.
You have to be reasonable and come up with reasonable solutions. And part of being reasonable sometimes means, doing what is necessary for the schools. Reasonable isn't always being like the wisdom of Solomon and having the child. Sometimes the right answer is to,
Jim,
do what is right by the schools.
I'll give you an example. The only problem I heard from Concord, and I was kind of blown away from this, never even thought of it. The only problem that they have in Concord is who comes out with their budget first. So if the school committee comes out with their budget, and let's say it's 2%, now the council members in Concord have to say, okay, do I put another 2%? That makes it 4% increase. So they're both trying to let out their budgets because the other entity has to be reasonable and say, geez, the city just put out a 3% increase in taxes. Is it fair for us to put out a 2% or a 3%? That's the only issue I've seen.
You're partially correct, Pat. Right? I think that remember if the city or one side were to put out a 3% increase or a 2% increase, that's on their roughly half of the expenditures in the city.
Right.
So if the other committee had a 2%, it wouldn't go from 2 to 4. It would just mean that. So if one side raised by 2 and the other side didn't raise at all, it would probably be like a 1% increase across the board. Because
okay, yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, but still,
The
you have to
political
check
pressure of
the
who comes
political-
out first
That's right.
is the issue I think that Pat's making,
Which-
and we're gonna live with that always, though.
No, exactly.
It's that's
you're right.
Well, we have a problem in Manchester right now with the budget cycle, right? Because the way the budget cycle is plays havoc with hiring practices,
hiring teachers.
the ability to hire people. We have 90 open teacher positions in Manchester tonight, right today. There are 90 open positions in district, and the district. I was reliably told this week that we're still receiving resignations from teachers at this point in the year.
Yeah, I heard the same
with
thing.
So that's a horrible position to be in. With principals coming back in 3 weeks and they've got classes in 5 weeks, and it's like, where do we get 90 teachers plus?
Yep. Yeah, the Board of School Committee needs to address that. I believe we'll meet just to
They
address.
do, but they're not meeting for another month, right?
Well, I don't know. I think we may be meeting before August.
All right. Well, listen, I'll let you back to the show. I didn't mean to filibuster and try to bump in all over it, but keep up the work, guys, and, we'll come up with the right answer eventually.
That's the goal, Jim. Thank you for calling. You didn't filibuster. I just
All right.
wanted to make sure that we got both sides of the discussion in on the show. We try
got
to
it.
be fair over here, and we really appreciate your calling in. Thank you.
No problem, Mike. All right. Thanks, guys.
Take care. So, made some good points, I think. One thing that I hadn't considered is that, yes, if we do get a new entity, this new entity is going to have its work cut out for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But hopefully it has the tools.
I mean, it's going to have some cultural changes. For example, the mayor. I agree with him. I believe the mayor has enough on her plate with respect to the city side. It's a 24/7 job.
Yeah.
Knowing the details, and Mayor Craig does know the details on the school side and on the city side. That is a tough nut to crack. So, yeah, would they? I would think I would like to look at that to say yes. There's a chairman or a president or whomever of our school district, and they're the top, whether you give them veto power, whether you give them a vote.
Well, certainly parliamentary procedure, there's enough written about it. We can find an example that would work.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not
Right.
like we have to reinvent the wheel on something like that.
But
There
our
are plenty
current
of
school
good
board
ones.
doesn't have doesn't go by parliamentary or Robert's rules. I guess at one time they voted to do a gray area of Robert rules, which I don't know how they do that, but we go by
And
rules.
the legislature
rules and
uses what,
policies.
Masons?
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
use
who's
the
ever heard of
Masons. That's
Masons?
right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So,
It's
but at
another-
least there's a book somewhere that can be referred to. I
Sure,
mean, we
absolutely.
if we were watching C-SPAN last night, we saw a whole
Yep,
bunch of parliamentary maneuvering going on. So in Congress, so it's part of the process.
Right.
But the nice thing that Jim points out is that this allows really to just open up every issue to discussion so that we're not bound to the past. We're not bound because that's the way it was done before.
Right.
And so that's, I think, to kind of circle back to your suggestion of who would be a good person to get on this board is someone with an open mind, someone who may not
Correct.
be locked into a position
Correct.
ahead of time.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily an educational background because it's a governance background. This policy is going to be the governance of the school
I
district.
mean, I can imagine
not-
a guy that understands systems in
Exactly.
manufacturing might be the kind of guy that could put together a system that would
That would
work for
us.
governing a school district. You know what I mean? It does. You don't
Absolutely.
have to be, born and bred in the department to be able to work on this.
Yeah, and to break away from the state, from the general court, from state reps and the Senate, to break away from that, I think it's time. I think Manchester is very capable of governing itself without having to go to the state and ask for permission to do different, cultural changes.
And does the
and
bill
that's-
do that? Does that
it
kind
does.
of establish from now on we can continue with
It
this
does.
charter commission process
Correct.
to address our school
Yeah, so
system?
it
So in
says-
10 years we could come back and do it again?
That's correct. With school district, well, actually, this governing body now, if the voters in 2020 pass this, the governing body will be like the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, able to set up their own charter. So the school district,
Okay.
the school board will be able to set up their own charter commission if they want.
So
to
another
change some things.
home rule situation like
Correct.
we talked about earlier.
But
in the
they
show.
don't have to have permission from the legislator. All they have to do is get enough votes to set up a charter commission to look at the school district again.
Well, I got to tell you, when it comes to Manchester, experience shows me that the less we have to deal with the legislature, the better off we are. Because I don't know what the mentality up in Concord in the House anyway concerning Manchester seems to be very negative, and it persists, and I don't understand it because we provide services to people from those towns who gravitate here, and we certainly should, if
Well, they
not
don't-
paid, at least appreciated for it.
Yeah, they don't really see that. I mean, they're starting to see it with Safe Station. We have clear,
We've got the
valid,
names, we got the receipts, as
validated
they say,
numbers.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I remember Ware sent us a bill for $2,500 or something for taking care of some homeless people that went to Ware, this home in Ware. I believe it was Ware. Maybe it was Keene. It was Keene, I think. So anyways, I thought, okay, let's pay the bill. Oh, no, we're not paying this bill. Well, yeah. I looked up Safe Station. There was like 7 or 8 people from Keene that came in. So what was that tab?
Yeah.
So you owe us $5,000 minus the $2,300. Okay, you owe us.
Yeah, pay it with a voucher,
You
right?
owe us $2,700. You owe us $27.
Yeah.
You know.
And you know, I gotta say, I chuckle. It's kind of fun to talk about that, and in reality, it's dollars and cents out of our tax bills.
Yeah.
It is important stuff. But I wonder if it's a good idea for cities and towns to start sniping at each other like that. I would rather see a more cooperative approach as far as how can we help,
Yeah, I
as
agree.
opposed to here's
I
the
agree.
bill. You know what I mean?
I mean, I Safe Station would never say, where you from? Oh, you're from Hooksett? No. They have an oath that they go by. I'm going to help anybody who shows up at the
Well,
door, and that's the way it ought
you
to
know
be.
that was debated in the Board of Mayor and Aldermen at length, and I think the right side won out on that one. I
Right.
mean, I think
Absolutely.
we see the good that's being done. Well, we're being told to wrap up. I hope, folks, that we've done justice to the topic. We've certainly tried to hit every aspect of it. Pay attention. You're going to get a new ballot or a second ballot or an additional ballot come November. You're going to be asked to vote for 9 people on a charter commission that is going to address the issues of governance of our school district going forward and work on that project for a year. So think about signing up to run for the charter commission, and certainly make sure that you don't neglect to vote for people on that charter commission. It's going to be very important. It's going to affect your taxes, and we hope we get more news about it, and we hope people pay attention to that. Pat, I want to thank you for coming
you,
in.
Mike.
You're a wealth of knowledge. I mean,
you.
just about any topic I can call you and see if you want to do a show. But
Yeah.
this one in particular, good job on the bill, getting it passed. That's no small task. And you're running for the commission as well, huh?
I am. I brought it forward. I would, I don't think it'd be fair for me just to say, okay, the
Someone
bill
else
passed,
handle it?
I'm backing up.
Well, you're not that kind of guy. If there's a need, you step in.
No,
We've seen you
absolutely.
everywhere in
Absolutely.
Manchester, so I would never have expected that of you. Folks, thank you very much for watching. We really hope that we've been able to provide some information, maybe a little entertainment for you tonight. This is important stuff. I know Bob Backus is a lot more fun, a lot smarter, a lot prettier than I am, and he'll be back next week to run the show, and I'll be back as well, sitting in the other chair to try to provide a little comic relief. Thank you very much for watching. We hope you have a great rest of the week. Keep your eyes open, folks. There's still open slots for people to run, to help run this city, municipal elections. Think about stepping up and volunteering, putting your name in. Can't be any harm in it. Take care, folks. We will see you next week.